Episode 14, Succession Planning, Preparing for Leadership Transitions Early. Welcome to HR Decoded, the podcast where we uncomplicate the people problems breaking your business. I'm your host, Annika Hall, fractional COO and People Ops Strategist. And today we're talking about succession planning and why the time to start preparing for leadership transitions is long before anyone quits. So here's the trap I see way too often. A key leader gives notice or burns out, and suddenly the company's scrambling. No backup plan, no one's ready to step in, and you now have a team or teams that are stuck in limbo. The sad part is that it's a preventable situation. All it requires is a little planning. The issue is that a lot of people believe that succession planning is something that only big corporations do. And I will say, yes, that's true. Big corporations seem to be the ones that primarily do succession planning. But it's not because it's only for large organizations. From experience, I can tell you that it's because they found out the hard way that they should have done it a lot earlier. And they ended up wasting a bunch of resources trying to correct that mistake and then said, okay, let's not do that again. And then they started succession planning. So know that I've been in this game a long time, and I am telling you that if you are building a startup or a company that you want to scale, succession planning is one of the smartest, lowest cost investments you can make, because succession planning isn't about predicting who's leaving. It's about preparing your company to run and lead at every stage of growth. It's also what I like to call, what if I get hit by a bus plan? Life happens, and all operations shouldn't come to a complete stop because one person is no longer there, right? So what does succession planning actually mean? And I want to be clear that it's not just saying, okay, who's next in line? It's about setting up systems for identifying future leaders early, developing them before there's an emergency, and designing a talent pipeline that keeps your company resilient no matter who's in the seat. So, succession planning isn't supposed to be reactive. It's literally a risk management and retention plan wrapped in one strategy, okay? So before we jump into outlining, like how to outline a succession plan, I really think it's important to know why startups continuously avoid it to begin with. And the reality is that most startups are focused on speed and not legacy, right? The original founders are still there. The original, engineering department is still there, and everybody's really bought into the company, the culture, the mission, the vision, right? And we sometimes in that situation don't look, 3, 4, 5, 10 years ahead, right? We're all wrapped in the moment, just trying to get this thing going and this engine flowing, right? And so founders assume, we'll deal with that when we're bigger, or we don't have those layers of leadership yet that need succession planning, or we could always hire externally when we need something. But what actually happens is that a high-performing, IC gets promoted into leadership and they flounder because they don't have the skills to be a leader. They have the skills to be an IC. The founders get burned out and they want to step back from the day-to-day, but there's no one really ready to take over, right? And you quickly find out that the organization was highly dependent on that one person and really wasn't set up to truly scale beyond them, right? Or you have a department lead that leaves and suddenly everything is on fire. And here's the thing, succession planning is always cheaper when it's planned and not panicked, right? So here's my steps to, starting a succession planning early, right? I have 5 different steps that I'm going to go through and break down each one. So number 1, identify the critical roles you have first, right? Start by identifying the roles that would create the biggest disruption if vacated. And just a little hint, this isn't just the executives, okay? It might be your senior engineer that has key infrastructure knowledge. And if they leave or something happens, that goes with them, okay? It might be, that client-facing lead that has deep relations and connections, and if they leave, you lose those connections. Or it could be your solo HR or operations backbone who manages payroll and nobody else knows how to do it, and now you have a problem with people getting paid, okay? So you have to ask yourself, if this person left tomorrow, what would break? And whatever answer you get, those are your succession flags, okay? You need to take care of those quickly, all right? Number 2, spot potential successors early. I'm going to say something that might be a little bit backwards, okay? But I want you to look beyond performance, because people are great at a skill, right? But it doesn't mean that they will be great successors. The most common kind of saying for this is like, just because you're good at sales doesn't mean you're good at managing salespeople. It's a different skill. Okay, so if you base succession solely on their performance in their current role, I want you to know that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to translate, right? And you could potentially end up being disappointed, okay? In this case, you need to look for readiness and trajectory, right? These signals really include like strong cross-functional relationships, right? Strategic thinking, not just execution, but their overall thought process from getting from A to Z. Their curiosity about the business, their business acumen, not just their knowledge about the lane they're in. And most important, you want to make sure that they have respect from their peers and other managers. Transitioning into a role is very tough, but in succession planning and succession changes, you want to know that people will follow that person and trust that person. And I will tell you from experience, I have transitioned into many roles. I started my career off at like entry-level HR. I went into immigration. I went into, operations. I did a lot of different things in my role. But in my role today as general business operations, it's not just people operations. I do general business operations as well. And I have led marketing teams, legal departments, finance teams, HR, people ops, product. I've done all sorts of things, right? And I have been in places and in positions to take over as the successor in many different departments. And it wasn't just my skill. I am not by trade an accountant, right? I'm not by trade a content creator. Obviously I build this content, but I wasn't by trade a content creator or building out content strategies or product roadmaps, PDRs. That wasn't originally my career path, but somebody saw something in me and helped develop me into being able to take over multiple functions, and they really saw my readiness and my trajectory to do that. So that's what I'm trying to get across to you all, right? And so when you have found that person that you think might fit that, right? You don't want to, by the way, come out and just say, hey, in case so-and-so leaves, I want to train you to take over. Don't do that. Okay. That's the wrong approach to approaching somebody that you see as a potential successor in your organization. You want to create visibility. But what I mean by create visibility is you want to create a situation where they know that you see their potential. Create visibility about them is really what I'm trying to get across. And so you want to say something like, hey, I don't know what your future career goals are, but I think you are in a really good place to go down X path, right? I want to offer you some training and some development in these areas in the event that you choose to, go down this path. Are you interested? This approach, one, doesn't send up a bunch of red flags, right? It doesn't get them thinking, oh, is so-and-so leaving, starting rumors, creating unnecessary drama or chaos in the organization. But it does open the doors to a conversation and also helps you build retention, because the person can really see that there's a future, that you see a future with them, right? They have visibility to you, to your company, and that you want to see them there for the long haul, okay? All right, let's jump over to number 3, right? We want to build development plans with intent. Okay, succession planning isn't just a list of things, it's a process. For each, potential future leader, you're going to want to build exposure opportunities. This includes giving them the ability to shadow, cross train, give them stretch projects to really see how they do and get their feet wet. Offer them mentorship and coaching with you, one-on-one check-ins, once a month or something. And that kind of gets them, into the space of building that connection with you or other leaders, so that when they do potentially transition, they're not coming into a new space trying to get the lay of the land. Okay. You also want to make sure they receive leadership capability development, not just domain expertise, right? Just because they know, again, just because they understand sales, you want to teach them sales, does not mean they can manage sales people. You have to give them the development to build their leadership skills, learn their leadership style, how they go about connecting with people, how they go about connecting into that role. You want to give them the space to develop those skills over time, and it takes time, okay? Also, develop milestones that help them grow into the next role. You want to make sure that they understand where the measure of success is, so that when they move into the role, the expectations are already set. And so you could do that by giving them milestones to reach, whether it's training in a certain time period, or getting some sort of certification, or creating a new program or process, or building out SOPs. It could be really anything, but you want to give them something that shows their growth into that role. And yes, when I go down a list like that, it might seem like it's a lot, but I can tell you it's necessary. And again, you're pre-planning, right? This is not something that you have to do over the next week, right? If you are planning ahead, okay, because no one's left yet, you're just planning for the future, there's no pressure to get this done in any set time frame. You can spread this out over 6 months, 9 months, a year, to really help build successful successors, right? And we don't know when life is going to happen, but we know it's going to happen. You just don't know the when, and we're just getting prepared. So kind of take some of the pressure off, and really start looking at these bullet points and saying, okay, what can I do, and in what time frame, and be realistic with your schedule and the schedule of the organization to really help build this out. All right, so moving on to number 4. We want to make sure that we are documenting key workflows and decisions. Another thing that people don't realize is that succession fails when context lives in people's heads only, okay? In startups and even more established organizations, there's a lot of institutional knowledge that lives in people's heads, right? And when they leave, it's lost. So you need to start documenting, outline how decisions are made. What relationships internally and externally really matter, right? I'm not saying that there are people in the organization that don't matter, but I'm saying there are key roles and relationships that really, really, really matter and need to stay close. A lot of my career has been spent in the tech industry, right? And most people, when they think about tech, they're like, oh yeah, product and engineering, they really, really need to be connected at all times. And that's true. Product and engineering are important. They could be seen as like the lifebloods of the organization. But you also you want to know what other connections and departments are really, really, really extremely important. Finance, right? Finance and product need to be lockstep, because the finance department controls the budget. Also, they perform other duties outside of just kind of maintaining the budget, right? Sometimes they're doing ROI projections for products that people want to launch. Engineering departments really need to stay connected with their recruiting departments. If you don't, you're going to struggle to find your talent. If they're not understanding what you need, or those two departments are not lockstep, you will struggle. And so context matters, but relationships also really matter within an organization, and people need to understand who the players are, and or what departments play pivotal roles in the success for these successors, right? Also, You want to document what recurring workflows and systems are owned by this role so that they know what they're supposed to be doing and what they own, because they don't know what they don't know. They're not in the role today, right? So if it's documented and it's outlined, then it helps them roll into, or I would say acclimate into the role a lot easier, right? And this step not only prepares a person, but also helps build out an ecosystem that is transferable. This is an important note because succession planning is continuous, right? It's not dependent on an individual. So there are times where people pass things along, right? Things that they own, they pass it to the next person, and that's great, right? But it doesn't mean that that new person that takes over is going to do the same thing for the next successor. And so it's important to make sure that these things are documented so that the ecosystem can transfer and isn't dependent on a single individual, okay? All right, now we're going to jump over to the last step. This is step 5. And this is a big step. You need to normalize succession planning across the organization, okay? You can start off small with one department here or there, but eventually this should be a regular part of leadership conversations. And here's why. Again, life happens. I have had executives take 3-month sabbaticals, have babies, get arrested, end up in rehab, have surgery, and even unfortunately die, right? And when there was no plan, the companies started to fail. And I was called in to plug holes in the sinking ship until I could create a system or put systems in place to really stop the bleeding. And I'm telling you, it doesn't have to be that way. Everyone understands the need to keep the train moving. And most leaders would appreciate knowing that there is a plan in case they need to step away for a bit so that they don't come back to chaos, right? In the event that they're coming back, okay? So to get started, I'd simply ask your department leads, hey, if you had to step away for 2 months, who could take over? Or what would need to be in place to make that happen smoothly? Okay, this helps you, get the participation you need from the ones who are doing the job today. And also it builds ownership and accountability to the leadership team to have that ownership of their department so that the train does keep moving. And it also takes some pressure off of you. If you're one of the, founders or owners that listens to this podcast, there's a lot of pressure when it comes to succession planning because you don't know what you don't know either, if you're being honest. And so it takes some of the guesswork out of who could do the job and how they do the job if you have these conversations early on with your leadership team and get this built out, okay? So overall, succession planning isn't just about replacing people. It's about scaling your leadership. Being prepared for when life happens it's going to take a lot of stress off of your shoulders and help you continue down your path of success, and hopefully with a little less bumps along the way. And if you want help, okay, I always have to put in, my shameless plug. I will say here, if you want help outlining and building your succession planning frameworks, reach out to me. I do succession planning workshops. I also take those on as special projects for organizations and come in and I can help build those out fairly quickly for you so that you can kind of continue with business as normal, and you have somebody who's coming in and doing it fairly quickly so that you have it built out and can just keep reiterating on it. You can reach out to me via email, send me email info@hrdecoded.pro, or visit my website www.hrdecoded.pro and book a free strategy call with me, right? It costs you nothing. We can take 30 minutes, an hour, go through what it is that you need, and I can help outline a plan for you. So don't hesitate to reach out. And that is all for today. So we'll be back next week with another episode of HR Decoded, and I will see you then. Have a good one.